And we are back for some more NHL 101 and part 3 in my series introducing each of the NHL's 32 teams, going division by division. So today we have the 8 teams that make up the Atlantic Division. By the way, if you do find yourself enjoying this video at any point and you like to do that kind of thing, the subscribe button down there can probably help you out. Also, since I have had a couple of people asking, don't worry, I will continue doing NHL 101 videos, but especially with the expansion draft coming up and I still have a number of teams to get done for that, there will be quite a bit more of those, at least over the next couple of months, but don't worry, we're going to keep doing these as well. We left off in part 2 with the Chicago Blackhawks, the last Original 6 team in the Western Conference. And today we start with another Original 6 team who actually used to be in the Western Conference until just recently, that being the Detroit Redwings. Like each of their 5 sibling teams, the Red Wings have had a long and storied history since their inception in 1926. But if their success as a franchise were a roller coaster, it would not be a terribly interesting one, because in the 3 decades between 1934 and 1965, there just were not a whole lot of downs. Although I'm not sure how great a metaphor a roller coaster is for a team's overall success, considering with roller coasters, some of the most exciting parts of them are the downhills, and I don't even know what a loop would look like with a team's success, but we're getting off subject. Now, keeping in mind, of course, that for most of that 30-year period, the league was just made up of the original 6 teams, the Red Wings went to a still impressive 18 Stanley Cup Finals and won 7 of them, with the last 4 of those coming during the 25-year period that all-time great player Gordie Howe spent with the team. But as the NHL doubled in size in 1967, Detroit hit its first extended period of, well, being mostly terrible. It was a roughly 2-decade period of time for the Red Wings that was only a couple of times interrupted by seasons that showed at least a mild amount of competence before finally coming to an end with the introduction of the Russian Five, an aptly named group of 5 Russian players, 3 of whom defected from the Soviet Union to come play in the US with help from the team. Starting for the most part anyway in the 90s, the 5 would help kick off a second era of Red Wings success that once again would last nearly 30 years. Between 1990 and 2016, there was only 1 year that didn't feature the Red Wings in the playoffs, and that's because the NHL decided to skip that season in 2005, with 25 consecutive playoff appearances for Detroit. It was a period of time that would include 16 division titles, 17 seasons with 100+ points, including a run of 12 such seasons in a row, that would see the Red Wings go to the Stanley Cup Finals 6 times and win it 4 times, with the last of those victories coming in 2008, which would be the franchise's 11th Stanley Cup victory, which, although it might be hard to tell by looking at them right now, does make them the most successful US-based franchise. But I did have to specify US-based franchise because as far as the most successful franchise in the NHL's history is concerned, well, that would be the Montreal Canadiens. The oldest team in the NHL, the Canadiens, or Habs as they are also known, have been around longer than the NHL itself. Originally founded in 1909 to represent the French-speaking population of Montreal, they have won the Stanley Cup 24 times, 23 of those coming in their 31 Cup Finals appearances since the NHL started in 1917. It's a franchise with such a storied history of success that they wouldn't miss the playoffs in consecutive years starting in 1923 until the 1999 and 2000 seasons. And although it has now been over 27 years since they hosted the Cup, that is well over double their previous long Cup drought. But of course, as the league continued to expand by the late 90s, all of that has certainly at the very least slowed down for them. Because while they do continue to make the playoffs more often than not, they haven't even been to a Stanley Cup Finals, much less won one, since 1993 when they won their last one. Though, for what it's worth, they were the last Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, so at least they've got that going for them, I guess. But with that being said, much like how I don't think anybody would be feeling too bad for the Yankees if they went 30 years without a title, with their name already on the Cup 24 times, and especially considering their history of great seasons, great players, and especially great goalies, I don't think anybody's going to be feeling too bad for the Canadiens anytime soon either. Which, at least right now anyway, is probably a sentiment held by most fans across the league that they share with the US's oldest team in the Boston Bruins. Although, for the Bruins, that probably has as much to do with the other teams in that city's success as it does their own, but Anyway, founded in 1924, although the Bruins weren't the first professional hockey team in the US or the first ones to compete for a Stanley Cup, they were the first to join the NHL and are the oldest remaining US team. Another one of these original 6 teams that has way too much history to cover in just a few seconds, the Bruins have also been one of the league's most consistently good teams throughout their history. But they have also been potentially the team with the most wasted potential when it comes to winning Stanley Cups. And I say that because there are only 3 teams with a better franchise total points percentage, the NHL's version of a win percentage, than the Bruins have. And one of those is Vegas, who's only been in the league for a few seasons. But even with all of that winning over nearly a century and 73 playoff appearances, they only have 6 Stanley Cups to show for it. But of course, that isn't to say that this has been a bad franchise, far from it. After all, only the Canadiens have more wins than they do. And they have also had their fair share of good seasons and great players like Bobby Orr and Ray Bourque, just to name a couple. But again, the ultimate goal is to raise that Stanley Cup, which they've only managed to do 6 times in 20 trips, with those 14 finals losses being the most of any team. But they have at least been to the Cup Finals 3 times and won it once in the last decade, which is, thanks in large part to the Bruins, something that cannot be said for one of their biggest rivals in the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs and Bruins rivalry goes back to the mid-1920s, and of course, being 2 of the 6 original 6 teams, they have played against each other quite a bit, but where rivalries are born and bred is the postseason. And while the 2 didn't meet in the postseason from 1974 until 2013, the last 3 postseason series that they've shared have definitely re-established that feud, at least on the Toronto end anyway. And I say on the Toronto side specifically because in the last 3 times that they've met since 2013 in the playoffs, the Bruins have won all 3 of those first round series. And to rub even more salt into that wound for Toronto fans, all 3 of those series were lost in 7 games. But while that certainly has been frustrating to say the least for Leafs fans, those early playoff exits are something that they have become more accustomed to, as the team has not been to the second round of the playoffs since 2004. Though, to be fair, that may change this year, but at least as of March 2021, that still stands. But even worse than that, although once again this could change because the Leafs do look like they could legitimately do it for the first time in a while, they haven't even been to a Stanley Cup Finals series since they won it in 1967. Which, yes, was the last year of that original 6 period over 50 years ago. And like a number of other teams that have had these longer cup droughts like the Leafs are currently in, it's been mostly death by mediocrity. Now, they have had a couple of good years here and there, like the last couple of years, and some bad ones like 2015 and most of the 80s, but for the most part, it's been fringe playoffs for the Leafs, and regardless of how they make the playoffs, it hasn't really mattered once they get there. But the Leafs' history really is a story of 2 halves. Another team that's older than the NHL itself, they have 13 cup titles in 21 finals appearances, which does make them the second most winning team when it comes to Stanley Cups. Though once again, finding that 14th cup has proven to be a challenge. Oh, and if you are a newer fan to hockey and thinking, wow, way to just name your team after a leaf that's on your country's flag, well, the Maple Leaf has represented Toronto's hockey team for quite a bit longer than it has Canada, so that might be more Canada copying the Maple Leafs than anything else, but I'm not going to go quite that far. Even outside of their struggle over the last few years, the Leafs still do get way more than their fair share of media coverage. So if you are again a newer fan and need maybe a comparison to another league, you can kind of think of the Leafs as the Cowboys of the NHL. But you actually don't have to look far from Toronto to find another team that's looking for their first Stanley Cup in the last 50 years. Literally, because just across the border in Buffalo, the Sabres are still looking for their franchise's first Stanley Cup in 51 seasons of existence. Now, to be fair, since they entered the league in 1970, the Sabres have at least been to the finals twice, which might not seem like a lot, but it is at least 2 more times than their neighbors to the north have been in that time. Plus, I'm a Mariners fan, so yeah. Plus, it can be argued, and is fairly frequently, that they may have been cheated out of a win in one of those 2 finals appearances at the hands, or I guess feet, of Brett Hull and the Stars. Either way though, as it stands right now, even with 29 playoff appearances in their 51 years as a team, that final victory and Stanley Cup win still remains elusive. And with what is soon to be an NHL record-tying 10-year-long playoff drought, it's hard to ignore some of the similarities between them and the football team that shares their city. Though to be fair with the Bills, they did actually look very good this last season and could be set up to be one of the NFL's better teams for years to come, which is something that the Sabres have to only hope could be on their horizon. And if it is, that means they're gonna have to find a way to keep Jack Eichel in town. But if he does stay, that's definitely a possibility. No matter how bad things definitely look in this 2021 season. Even with Eichel though, going forward, the problem for them could end up being that 1, even 2 star players does not a cup winner make. Which can be even further evidenced by the 2020 Stanley Cup winning Tampa Bay Lightning. But while the Lightning are the defending champs and perennial powerhouse team in the NHL, they certainly did not start off that way as a franchise. Founded in 1992, their first 10 seasons only featured 1 playoff trip and only 3 30-plus win seasons, including 4 years where they didn't even win 20 games, which, in an 82-game season, is not very good. Granted, one of those 4 seasons was the shortened 1995 season where they didn't play anywhere near 82 games, but still, by the early 2000s, they certainly needed to find a way to get things turned around. And fortunately, they did just that, winning the division and going to the playoffs for the second time as a franchise in 2003, and then the next year in 2004, winning 46 games, the division, and a 3rd playoff appearance. But even more importantly than just making the playoffs, in that 3rd playoff appearance as a franchise in 2004, they would go on all the way to win the Stanley Cup. And in so doing, becoming the southernmost team to ever win the Stanley Cup, a title that they actually still hold today, although only the Florida Panthers can really change that. But still, even at the time, they were just the 2nd team south of Colorado to win the Cup, the other being Dallas, which is something that old-time hockey purists just loved. Because really, nothing goes with championship hockey like palm trees. But of course, that Stanley Cup win for them led immediately into the locked-out season of 2005, where nobody played any hockey. And then coming out of that, the team kind of had its ups and downs until 2014, where ever since then, they've established themselves once again as a dominant force in the NHL. As in the last 7 years, they've won 40-plus games in every season, 50-plus in 3 of those seasons, and a record-tying 62 wins in 2019. Even going to a 2nd Stanley Cup Finals in that stretch, but losing it in 2015. But of course, going back to that record-setting 62-win season in 2019, the Lightning immediately followed that up by being unceremoniously swept out of the first round by a franchise that had never won a playoff series leading up to that, which was certainly one of, if not the biggest upset in NHL playoffs history. Fortunately for the Lightning, though, they wouldn't have to live with the disappointing sting of how that season ended for all that long, because as they returned to the playoffs in the 2020 COVID bubble, they would go all the way to win the Stanley Cup. All in all, though, especially considering how things went for the first decade of existence for this franchise, in the years that followed, the success that they found has been very impressive. Or, for hockey purists who don't think that hockey has any place in areas where it doesn't snow, irritating. But while Tampa Bay has seen mostly good or even great teams since its rough start, pretty much the exact opposite has been true for their in-state rival, the Florida Panthers. Joining the league in 1993, just 1 year after Tampa Bay, the Miami-based team made the Stanley Cup Finals in just their 3rd season in the NHL, though they would end up losing that final series. And although they did make the playoffs again in the season that followed, they have not won another playoff series in just 4, or if you count the 2020 play-in round, 5 playoff appearances since that finals appearance in 1996. Even at one point going on a stretch, which started in 2001, that saw them miss the playoffs in 10 consecutive seasons, tying an NHL record for consecutive seasons without a playoff appearance and becoming the only team to do that while in one city. Although, that being said, the Sabres are about to become the 2nd team to do so, and could break that record next year, but it's still pretty bad. All of which, because of the lack of success, and probably partially as a result of that, the lack of fan turnout, has led to questions cropping up over and over again of whether or not this team's future does live in Miami. But at least over the last couple of years anyway, it does seem like they've kind of started to pick things up again, and we will have to wait and see whether or not they can continue to build off of that and turn this into a little bit more of a successful franchise from a league perspective, but it does seem to at least be a good sign. Either way, though, they aren't the only team in their division from that early 90s expansion period that has been struggling a bit more recently. At least for the Ottawa Senators, though, their window of success did last noticeably longer than the year or two that it did for the Panthers, even if it did result in largely the same outcome of one Cup Finals appearance where they came up empty. Joining the league in 1992, for their first few seasons in the league, the Senators were bad. I mean, epically, historically bad. And I do not say that lightly. Okay, just for context, since 1930, only 3 teams have won fewer games in a single season than the 10 games the Senators won in 84 games of their inaugural year. And no team has or is likely to ever lose as many games as they did, with 70 in the L column that year. Oh, and one of those 3 teams with fewer wins in a single season was the 1994-95 Sens. And yes, that was a shortened season where they only played 48 games, but a record of 9-34-5 is not good no matter how you cut it. I mean, just from a current perspective, things might look very, very, very bad for the Sabres as they currently sit 6-22-4 on the season, but they would have to still go 3-12-1 the rest of the way to just equal that. And that was still the best points percentage in their first 3 years as a franchise that the Senators had. Again, keeping in mind that Ottawa lost 131 games in their first 2 seasons in the league, and didn't even eclipse 20 wins in a season until their 5th season as a team. Of course, naturally, coming off of those 4 historically bad years to start off their franchise, the Senators went on to make the playoffs 11 straight seasons, with 6 100-plus point seasons. In fact, in a 9-season stretch between 1998 and 2008, the Senators had as many points in each one of those seasons as they had combined between their first 3 seasons as a team. In that time, winning 4 division titles, 8 playoff rounds, and going to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2007, although once again they would lose. Although, to be clear, much like as we talked about with the Winnipeg Jets in the Central Division, this is not the first version of the Ottawa Senators. The original Ottawa Senators were founded in 1883 and were part of the early NHL. They won 11 Stanley Cups, 4 of those during their time in the NHL before they were disbanded in 1934. And while all of that is very much a part of Ottawa's rich hockey history as a city, this iteration of the Senators is very much an entirely different franchise. A fact that can all too easily be seen by the difference of what that version of the Ottawa Senators were able to do versus the circus on and off the ice that this version of the Ottawa Senators have become in the last few years especially. Although that being said, even these last few years still have not been anywhere near as bad as their first few. Plus, they did just get to pick twice early in the first round of this last draft, so maybe if they can get some of those prospects to develop, they can pull things together, and maybe they do have a bright future. But for now, things still don't look great in Ottawa. And those are the 8 teams that make up the NHL's Atlantic Division. We'll pick up there next time with the 4th and final part in this series and the Metropolitan Division to finish off the Eastern Conference. And so with that, as always, if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. And I would like to hear your thoughts in the comment section on what other things you would like to see in this series, or maybe your thoughts on some of these teams. Otherwise, stay safe out there and be good to each other. Peace!